Thank you, Chris.
Yeah. Anyways, we would kick off the next session. And the next session is something, it's a topic I really care about because I get this question a lot from a number of authors and people from the community. They come to me with the question, how do I find the next title for my blog post? How do I want to keep writing, but I don't know, what next to write. So I decided to make that the final session of this workshop series before we go dive into the hackathon proper. And to do this, we've created a couple of questions that we will be answering on this call, on this stream. Yeah, I'm used to Zoom meetings, but we have a number of questions we will be answering on this stream. And if you have any more questions, you can also ask them in comments. We will be looking and we'll take those after. So over to the 8 questions. I did justice by listing them out here, and we will just go over them. Colby will share his thoughts, and I would weigh in on some of them as well. So, um, before we start, if you could also like share some information about this stream on Twitter, you could tag Colby and you could tag myself. Colby, you want to put your Twitter handle in the chat?
Yeah, I would be happy to.
Yeah,
Sorry, on the chat again. Colby Fayock everywhere.
yeah. And at iChulo. Yeah, just type William on Twitter. They'll know I'm the one.
The only William.
Yeah. So let's try to get as many folks into the stream so people can also learn from, you know, what we're about to share. But we'll jump straight into the first question, which is, what forms of technical content do you create, Colby? And sorry, I skipped the first part, which is supposed to be, you could tell us about yourself, introduce yourself for those that weren't here yesterday.
Sure. So yeah, let's start with that. So I'm Colby Fayock, as everybody probably knows by now. But I'm a developer experience engineer at Cloudering. So I work from everywhere to technical content, which we're talking about today, to building integrations, proof of concepts. I mostly it revolves around the code side of things in the developer experience world. So I do what I can to help developers be productive. Hopefully that's with Cloudering, but really I try to help them be productive with whatever they're doing.
Thank you very much, Colby. Yeah, and Colby is he likes to, would I say, underplay his skills. So definitely you should check out everything he puts. Just go to his Twitter. You're going to see a bunch of URLs. Follow
You're
those
too
and
kind.
you'll know the realities. So going straight to this, the first question here is, what forms of technical content you create, Colby, typically?
Sure. So it's mostly around the JavaScript world. I try to do tutorials, try to solve real world use cases. Now, the tutorials I do maybe not always be practical, but I try to gear it in a way where they can solve real problems with that tutorial. So just I write my tutorials mostly at spacejelly.dev. And one of the most recent ones, for instance, looking through, so I created a blog post about updating static content in Next.js automatically and using ISR, and that's a big issue that people need to solve, especially in the Jamstack world, right? Because part of the one of the downsides people used to say about the Jamstack is that it's static content. How I'm going to update it without building my entire site, and that's what ISR and what's Netlify call their solution. Either way, it's what they use to solve that, so that you can just the content will have a cache policy essentially, and then it'll automatically refresh whenever that content changes. So it really gives us the best of both worlds, where we're delivering that content statically, but we're also able to keep it nice and fresh. Anyways, that was specifically about that blog post. I don't know why I went in the weeds there, but you get the point. Like, I'm trying to solve
Yeah,
real problems with
yeah,
the blog posts.
that's cool. So you typically create blog posts. I've seen your streams, like you also do video content, right?
Yeah, so I try to do an article and video for everything I teach. I kind of just got in the habit of doing that because the way that I typically, I think we're going to cover this in another question, but what I like to do is I kind of create my article and it ends up being a script of sorts for my video. That way, like
Hmm.
rather than doing the video first, I can basically write down everything, I debug my way through the tutorial, whatever I need to do, and then just work my way through that written tutorial when it comes to the video.
That makes sense. I guess that's really efficient, creating one piece of content and then maximizing reach through like
Yeah,
various mediums.
exactly. And people learn differently, right? Like I personally prefer to look up in documentation. Some people prefer to read a blog post, and a lot of people nowadays like YouTube. So I try to make sure that it's in different forms. So depending on how you learn, you're going to be able to access that.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. And what motivates you to keep writing?
It's a good question. I think I just have a lot of fun with this. I'm doing it professionally now, so part of it's like it's part of my role, but I don't have to do this content, but I really enjoy doing it. I enjoy kind of the satisfaction of seeing that I help somebody solve their own problem, right? The way
Yeah,
I always see it in my mind is that I'm multiplying my impact by helping other people become productive.
yeah, that's really cool. Impact at scale.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. And how frequently do you create content? Do you do this weekly, every other day? I know I see the work rate, but I want to place a number to it.
So it used to be once a week I would have something out, but just because of the work that's been on my plate lately for work, I haven't quite hit those numbers. It's close to probably once a week, but not quite once a week anymore.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. And just weighing in a bit on, what motivates us to write. For the more junior folks on the stream, I would say starting out, one of the things that you know got me to write more frequently was trying to cement knowledge. Right, so I needed a firm grasp of whatever I was learning. At that time, I would write about JavaScript methods, .map, .filter, .splice, right? And I wrote them. And the funny thing was, I would get a lot of views and visits from some other beginner somewhere halfway across the world that also has like a similar problem or is looking for a simpler explanation to JavaScript methods. So a good part of the motivation I had then was to cement my knowledge and just to help someone out there.
It's interesting because when you're first learning a topic, you're going to have a different perspective on that topic than somebody who's very experienced, right? So being able to
Yeah,
empathize with them is a great way to help the other person learn as well. But also, as you're writing about these things and learning, there's this kind of terminology, learning in public, which I know Swix, if you're familiar with Swix, he always talks
yeah,
about that. But the great thing about learning in public is you're kind of holding yourself accountable, but also potential employers are seeing you learn these things. You need to, like, this is a way to separate yourself from other people, because maybe if you're going against one other person in a job search, right, if you have this nice portfolio of content showing that you're eager to continue learning and building new things versus somebody who doesn't have anything like that, you have a little bit more weight in that running, right?
yeah, yeah. Very true. Very, yeah. That's something I would say definitely helped personally with my career was creating content. And once you create written content, you get invited to speak about what you just wrote, right? So that even um, amplifies your reach. And to the next question, how do you source content titles and ideas? What are your go-to, strategies for that?
Yeah, so I have a never-ending list. Really, I don't have like a specific strategy on how I generate the ideas. It's just
Hmm.
if I'm anywhere, if I'm taking a walk, if I'm, playing with my kid, and all of a sudden an idea pops up. I try to make sure I write it so I don't forget it. Otherwise, I will forget it. But as I keep adding more and more to that list, so now I have a giant list of different topics that I eventually think would be interesting to write about. Anytime that I want to write something, I take a look at that list and see what pops out with me. Part of keeping that motivation is I do have fun with this. So I don't want to force myself to write about a topic that I'm not excited about at the time. So something's bound to jump off at that list of me, get me motivated and want to write about it. And it just makes it more fun and easy to work through that content.
That makes sense. If I hear you correctly, maintaining a list or creating a list of blog posts is very important to, having a constant stream of
Yeah.
content.
And also, like, if you're on Twitter or Discord or wherever you're at, if you see somebody talking about something that they find challenging and you think you can solve that, write it in a blog post or at least add it to the list of ideas. Because if somebody else has a challenge with that, it's likely other people will too. And if you can help them solve that, you have a winning article there.
Yeah, that's very correct. I think on my end, how I find titles, first I used to have, or I have this list on Trello with like number of posts from 2017. Some of them I haven't written, and I'm as a technical writer, I'm very intentional about finding, the problems that people are having with technologies and, wanting to write about them. So first, I would forage in communities, go to the help channels of different communities, especially JavaScript focused ones, to find out what issues are they, talking about the most, right? Especially as it regards that technology.
Yeah.
So if I go to, like, say, I go to Zeta's community and I go to the Ask Anything or the Help channel, and I find out what are the, the top questions people, or the top things people are unclear about. I decide to write a blog post from that, right? Or I add it to like queue. Same thing to apply to Cloudinary. And another way I get titles are from building stuff. So when I build something, they are the things I find the most difficult, right? Those I know for sure I'm going to write a blog post about them, because if I found it very difficult, someone else is going to find it
Great
difficult.
point.
And yeah. So when I'm building, I try as much as possible to log those things I find really difficult. And then there are certain things that are not difficult, but they are often overlooked. It could be the solution to a very simple error or even a warning, right? I would log those as well, as they require blog posts. When I started, there were also some pretty simple things that, you wouldn't readily find blog posts about, because people find them or people think they are too simple to write a blog post. That's also another misconception I've seen. Something as seemingly easy as browser storages, most people or most engineers would feel, writing about local storage, how to use local storage, yeah, that should be pretty straightforward. Well, for those starting out, it's not.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think this rolls into Attila made a great point in the chat there that every blog post is unique. And that he's absolutely right there, where your perspective may be the one thing that somebody else needs in order to learn something better.
yeah. That's true, 100%. And I also mentioned something like this yesterday. When you write a blog post, Google will always favor the more recent version of that blog post. If they have even exactly the same content, the more recent one will rank higher. You would even find a lot of content marketing organizations and teams repost blog posts they shared some couple of years ago. If it's still relevant, they repost them so they rank even higher. So if someone, or if someone already has written a post about some problem, but you have a unique perspective to it, just go ahead and write that. You definitely help someone out there. Another great source of content, I still do that till today, is going to Stack Overflow.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah, I feel if developers go to Stack Overflow to find solutions to problems, that maybe I could turn those solutions into blog posts. So that's how I found the homepage of Stack Overflow to even start with. I never knew they had like a homepage. Right? So I would go to Stack Overflow, put in like a query or a term. More recently, I started looking at Upright. So I would go to Stack Overflow, just type in Upright, rank the search by the most upvoted, and see what folks are asking about, how to maybe manage database or how to handle authentication. What does a specific variable, or how to set environment variables within a particular project? How would that work? Once I see that and I see a lot of upvotes on that, I know, yeah, I need to write a blog post for this. On discoverability for that blog post, I know Stack Overflow will always rank top, but at least I could try to come in second. And that's enough.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's enough motivation for me. And to your point, you want to say something? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, a Reddit is another good one that's very similar.
Hmm.
Stack Overflow is clearly more geared towards developers, but there's a lot of people going to Reddit to post these kind of questions too.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think there are some subreddits that are very like programming and developer focused. You go into like the subreddits for some JavaScript frameworks, a lot of questions in there. Also, you look at another way to find out blog posts, but this probably wouldn't apply to tutorials, more around like think pieces or like thought pieces, would be to look at RFCs of
Mm,
technologies, of major technologies. So you look at the current open React RFCs and you try to get in the mind of the author. Think about, what are they trying to change? Are they trying to introduce a new concept to React? Does it make sense? Um, should they embark on such initiative? That could form like a blockbuster post. Most times it will end up controversial, but at least you would get people thinking even deeply about the problem and
and
about
even
a
yourself,
potential
right?
solution.
And
Yeah, even
that's a
yourself.
healthy exercise to try to think through the problem. What are they trying to solve?
Yeah, exactly. That also works. And just like you said, I think the last point, not the last one, the second to the last one, um, is social media, right? So being more intentional about discovering challenges that developers face, and they put it on social media, especially on Twitter. I find a lot of developers frustrated about how to do, certain things or use certain technologies and softwares, and they put their frustration on Twitter. And for me, I see that as an opportunity. I'm like, here goes my next blog post. Maybe not the next blog post, but at least it goes in the backlog
Yeah,
of
exactly.
potential of potential blog posts. Um, so that's also one way to get ideas, content ideas. The last one, this I always have on my list, but I almost never use it because I always find the topic from these other sources, is to look at Google Trends and Google search, right? What are people searching for on the internet? Most times you would need a bit more specific search query or specific search term, and you can see the volume of that search query over time. And that should tell you, are people understanding this? Are there enough resources out there to help clarify this, right? I recently wrote a blog post about using aggregating API requests with Axios.org. I'd found a lot of blog posts in the past that had talked about it. There's even documentation about it, right? But after writing that blog post, I think it took off for some reason, right? It was more practical. It's
Yeah,
ranked like higher and it keeps getting like views. And I'm expecting it to stop getting views one day, but it still hasn't, right?
that's amazing.
That just says, a lot of people are constantly facing the same problem, and maybe I'm helping them solve it better. And that definitely came from looking at Google Trends.
Yeah. One I just thought about too is people running into issues using error messages. Because I'm just thinking about the amount of times I try to Google an error message where, sometimes it'll bring up like a GitHub issue, right? But other times there's nothing. close to that. So being able to use
Yeah,
error message as part of that strategy is a great idea.
yeah, yeah. I totally agree. Especially error messages for frameworks and tools that are not common, that are not like commonly used. I
Yeah.
know I know how many times I've closed like a Docker environment because I don't know what happened. It's like I tried, it's not working. I'm
Yeah.
like, peace, I'm
Throw it all
out.
away. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like this is not for me. I'll go use like Zeta instead of trying to have my own, you know, Dockerized MongoDB instance or a Postgres instance. I'll use a cloud service for that. So yeah, looking at error messages, that's definitely one way to find out ideas for blog posts. Um, moving on to the next question. What are the important metrics you use to determine success for your content? How do you track, or what metrics do you track for your content when you write?
Yeah, so I'll just be honest, like I don't dive too deep into the metrics of my content. I usually play the long game for the SEO related stuff, and I try to just
Hmm.
build quality content that I know is going to solve people's problems. Um, that said, some of the metrics that are important, page views are of course very important, but you want to also pay attention to the engagement of that page. So things like how long is somebody staying on the page? Because if you have a ton of views, but people are only staying on the page for a second or two, that means they're not reading it, right? So that's not going to help people. And Google can actually see that. They can see how long you were on that page. If there's Google Analytics or if they're going back and forth with the browser, they're able to determine that and see that people find that content engaging and use that as part of its rankings.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. I also track page views, and I track I track the engagement on posts. Previously, there was the bounce rate you could track on pages. That's if you have like Google Analytics. But with GA4, you get engagement rate, so you see like how long a reader spends on the page. And for those that host like their blog posts on, several developer publishing platforms like dev.to, I think on there you just mostly get views, and
Yeah.
you can see views of your post over time. In the case of that, a way I track engagement, or I track an important metric I track on a blog post is the interaction with the URLs and the CTAs on that post. So if the post is a tutorial to try out Cloudinary, for instance, and I have a link to sign up on Cloudinary, right? I would most likely, if I know someone at Cloudinary, I would add a UTM parameter to that link,
Yeah.
right? Otherwise, if it's on my blog, I can always track the clicks to that link. And that tells me even if someone spends time on the page, but they never went to Cloudinary, then I would feel some type of way, right? Especially for like new. Exactly. I would feel some type of way, or if the CTA is to check out another blog post or see a follow-up post or to sign up for something and they never do that. I'm like, okay, so I guess this post doesn't convert even though it has like a really high SEO ranking. So I also look at like the conversion on I look at the conversion on the CTAs. On the other hand, I also console myself with the fact that a developer could be building and using the blog post as a guide. So they probably don't need to click the CTAs there. They already have a Cloudinary account. That's the consolation I give to myself. But ultimately, I want to see people engage with with those links
For sure.
on the blog post. Yeah. Um, so this is definitely like a follow up to the previous question, which is like, what do you do when you create content? I know you play the long game, so do I, and I think that's what's most important, especially with SEO focused content. You would want to look at 3 months to 6 months into the future. Sometimes you would have to wait for like 9 months. It's like a baby,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Yeah. So, but what happens after this much time? And this content, it's created to, generate like some traffic to like a website or to your website, or you wrote this as a piece for the marketing team, but it receives, low engagement. It has like very few views. What do you do?
So I think you would have to at that point kind of evaluate what you were trying to do, and what the problem ultimately is. An SEO issue? Like, is it just not ranking well, or is it the engagement issue where people might be clicking through and just bailing right away, right? So I think
Yeah,
the first thing is to identify what is that issue. I'm noticing you said receives low engagement, so that's the specific issue we're talking about, isn't it?
yeah,
But so then at that point, you know it's hard. I usually try to get feedback from others, because like if I'm looking at an article and it feels good to me, that's going to be my perspective, right? But clearly other people don't feel that way if it's not helping others. So how can I get a perspective from somebody else that might make me think about it a little bit differently?
yeah. Yeah, that definitely does make sense. I think like having it, evaluating the blog post, right? Trying to understand. Um, Also, something I do is look at similar blog posts. I try to search for that post, right, as close to the title as possible. Search for it on Google, right? So just imagine searching for the title of your blog post on Google, but it's not on the first page. It's on the second page, and there are other blog posts with exactly the same title, right? That are already ranking higher than yours for some reason, right? That probably says, baby, you need to tweak the title, or you need to tweak the next
Yeah.
titles. Or before you even create the content, you need to check that title to be sure someone doesn't have like something almost similar on a more popular platform.
Yeah. And you also got to kind of think about, uh, like, again, to the engagement part, is your title being deceptive? So what I mean by that is, are you trying to get people to click through just to click through, but you're not actually solving the problem in the title? Now, there's different forms of content strategies, but generally, in our world, when we're trying to write technical content like this, we're trying to do it ultimately to solve that problem, not just simply get views to the page. So how can we help make sure that we're paying attention to what we're solving in that title, or at least changing the title to reflect that?
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I 100% get frustrated when I see a title that should solve my problem, but it's either purely marketing with three paragraphs leading me to try, a product, or it just deviates from the title and talks about something totally unrelated. That definitely like my I'm done.
Yeah. And that'll lose credit. Like, the next time somebody sees your link in the search results, you're losing credibility with those people. So they're not going to want to keep going to your blog if they keep
Yeah,
seeing that it's either low quality or deceptive.
yeah, yeah. That's great. Yeah, that's true. Um, so those are like the top questions I have, and the next one is, where can readers find you, and links to stuff you've created. I guess, having shared all these super tips, a lot of people want to learn from you, both those that
Yeah.
would read, that would watch the stream after now.
Yeah, so I all my technical content that I write is on spacejelly.dev. I also create the YouTube videos for each of my blog posts, so that's youtube.com/Colby Fayock.
Yeah, I'm just going to type it in the comment here.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. How did you get the custom URLs?
For YouTube?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if maybe, like, I don't have a huge channel by any means. So I've had the Colby Fayock one for a while. I think that just requires like 1,000 subscribers or something. I honestly
Oh,
don't I honestly don't know very much about how that works.
yeah. All right. That's cool. Lastly, do you have any advice for, for upcoming technical writers?
I think for me, one of the most challenging things was getting over the the imposter syndrome of all this. Who am I to write? Like, why should I write something on that? And going back to what Achilles said earlier, we all have our unique perspective on these things. So being able to like realize that you're going to be able to help somebody in a different way that somebody else could, is a really big motivator for me. And how can you take that and apply it to your content creation process?
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely true. Getting past that initial phase and writing introduction.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be perfect the first time. Just,
Yeah.
get something out there, and the more
Hmm.
you write, the easier it'll get.
Yeah, true. I like to say if you go back, to the very first blog post you wrote and you're not embarrassed by it, like totally embarrassed, then you haven't gone like really far. You're not learning
Yeah,
enough yet.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, like Kobe said, get started with writing. Just write something. Um, we yesterday we outlined a number of processes and ways you could ensure your content meets like certain qualities. There are tools out there. You can reach out to folks to help review your content, but just write. And for me, I would say the best way to get better at writing is to just keep writing. Just write. Whatever it is, you find out like an idea, it's even as short as 600 words, 800 words, just write. And while you're writing, also read, because that way you also like improve your vocabulary. You learn of like new concepts, new technologies, new ways to communicate even better, right? So I would say, as Kobe said, get started with writing, and I would say just keep writing. You could find like a cadence, maybe a weekly cadence to write or a monthly cadence, but just keep writing. Yeah, and read as well.
exactly. It's just
Yeah.
like, anything that's skill based, right? Like sports, for instance. Practicing is just going to keep getting you better and better. And even watching professionals do it, right? Like you're learning
Yeah.
something by watching them play. So practicing over and over, that's just going to make you a better writer.
Yeah. There's a question in the chat here that says, must you be an SME before you can write as a newbie? What's SME?
I think that's subject matter expert, and absolutely not.
Oh,
I encourage you to write as early as you can. The more you write, like you're again, you're learning in public, and you're helping enforcing what you are learning. There's just so many benefits to it.
yeah, totally agree 100%. You don't have to be an expert at something. Just imagine explaining something to your friend and they ask you, hey, can you write this down for me? Right? So I do not forget it. Just see a blog post as that, you explaining something to your friend. But then again, you shouldn't write it like you're talking to your friend. You would, yeah,
Well,
you
maybe
would,
that's their unique voice, right?
yeah, true, exactly. If you can find your unique voice. I mean, I've read some blog posts that they're both funny and they are catchy. They tell a story, right? And people love stories. So if you can find a way to communicate a concept as a story, be sure you're going to get the most engagement on the blog post.
For sure.
Yeah. So yeah, just keep writing. Something as simple as the simplest thing. I don't like to use the word simple because it's not really that simple. But yeah, the most straightforward things that you could think about when it comes to say web technology, um, it's been written multiple times over, but you can as well just write it one more time. You have nothing to lose, I would say.
Totally agree.
Yeah. Um, anyways, I can't see any more questions in the comments, but this has been a really great session and also eye-opening. I think now the participants are armed with what to build, how to write, and how to stay consistent with writing. So yeah, I have a really good feeling about this. And if anyone still has like questions or there's still something that's unclear, we're always hanging out on Discord, and we are going to answer any questions. And I think that should be it um, for this piece. Thank you very much, Colby.
Thanks
And
again for having me.
yeah, and on this note, I think I would like to kick off the hackathon properly. So yeah, so um, we've officially kicked off. You can go on now to kickstart a repository, build something using Cloudinary and Zeta and any other technology you feel like using. Um, like we said earlier, you do not